Hi and welcome to Making Sense of It with me, Emma Kenny.
And me, Pete Smith.
We don't often do these right now. We're trying to get back into the zone, aren't we?
We are trying to get back in the zone.
It's just been crazy.
It is. I'm wearing a hat.
Well, that's just because he's got lockdown hair. I've got lockdown hair as well. I keep getting criticised on social media and I'm like, God, people really are bored if that's all they've got to talk about, isn't it? My hair. I mean, actually, the weird bit is as well that this is actually me doing my hair. Whereas if I came out with my hair how it is in the morning, then I'd understand that people had something to say.
Well, I had a lockdown beard yesterday and then ruined it. I went from hipster to 1970s dad called Ian.
He walked into the kitchen and I just burst out laughing for about 15 minutes. I was filming with the One Show as well, so it was hilarious because at the end of the day, they were just trying to be serious and I was just half on the floor just cracking up because I was just like, no way, you look like somebody called John from 1970.
Well, I just walked out, didn't I? Didn't even meet the guys. It was too
That
late.
was so funny.
I just walked out and as I was just walking in with the cameras in the back, obviously social distancing, I just looked at them and I went, I've just cut my own beard off. I can't believe what I've just done. And they both looked at me and I just went, I'm not even going to try my hair. And Emma was like, you're not even going to say hello to them. You just come out and said like, I've just cut my own beard off. I was like a small child that's come out and like, you know, gone, I've just weed myself. You know, it's like, I've just cut my own beard off. They were like, so? Do we look like we care? Oh my God, it's the first thing we saw. We saw you and we were like, he's cut his beard off.
So true.
So I've got this, what I can only
It's
call...
like that you've had the conversation in your head, but the person you meet doesn't have a clue what you're on about.
Yeah. We're like, okay.
We do that a lot.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. And then I said to Emma, I said, it's quite accurate, you know, she was like, you look like someone called Mike from like, you know, what are you after? You have to see Duncan later. You know what I mean? No disrespect to the names Mike and Duncan. But
Well, you know what we're saying. It's
1970s.
1970s and 80s names, isn't it?
Like straight from like This Is England, you know. And,
Everyone was called Emma in my class. That was one of those names as well.
I mean, we don't hear anyone get called Pete these days.
No.
Emma, you do. Not Pete, though.
You don't get a lot.
Basically,
You don't get a lot of Emmas.
I'm living up to my name, Pete. You know, are you going on Pete's house later? Pete, are you going on Pete? You know. But I said, oh, it looks like the quite action money. And she went, no, the action men are the dark haired. What are you on about? You know, the dark haired, the brunette, whatever, black haired. You know. And I was like, no, there's a blonde one. There's a blonde one. And I was
He tried to convince me that the blonde one was what everyone wanted. I went, no, it wasn't. I had loads of mates and they all had dark hair. He went, yeah, you did. I went, go on then. He went, no. I said, you're looking it up, aren't you? You're looking up a blonde one. I went, it'll be ginger. And he just went, no. And he went, oh. And
I
then
googled it. It looked like not like I used to remember it. I tell you that now. And then I also saw
no
the bodies.
one wanted the blonde haired. I literally said, nobody wanted the blonde hair action man. It's the same as getting the short haired Barbie. Everybody knows you get it and you don't want that one.
Well, I didn't take that, and then I looked at it and I was like, yeah, she's right, actually. And it was just like, wow, I can't believe that they were actually made.
That was when you stood there and tried to pretend that you're moving your eyes with a little thing at the back of your head.
Eagle eye action man.
That was, you had to pay more for that.
We had one of them.
Blonde haired.
Yeah, well, yeah, we had them, and it was there was ones where you get the Christmas presents put in the middle for at the end when you're kids, you share them with your brother. But obviously, you know, my family being my family, my brother just decided to say that they're all his.
I don't get it. I don't get why any parents would buy siblings a present to share. That's just a recipe for disaster. That's
Well, it
just not
moved
how
on
it
to
works.
like, it was like Action Man stuff and all that, and there was like all this stuff, and I never saw any of it on a knife, but and then it went up to like Monopoly, and then became like Trivial Pursuit. So basically, it wasn't for us to share; it was for the.
I get the Monopoly and Trivial Pursuit,
Yeah.
but I don't get anybody buying presents for kids and then saying share it. It's
Well, I
like,
guess
no.
it's like, 'cause it
That's
was-
like saying I've got you a bike to share. It's like, well, I'm bigger,
I guess
so
it was
you're not going to.
expensive, wasn't it? Maybe isn't it? It was just like we can only afford one.
It's just
You know, he didn't share with Star Wars though.
no one
would
shares
share my
his
Star
Star Wars. Well, it's a weird time. Let's just acknowledge that. We've kind of started off with the Making Sense podcast by just going on about a complete ramble. But if you are catching this at a future date, we're actually talking about this from lockdown in the UK. Hopefully at the end of bloody lockdown. I'm so bored of it.
Yeah.
You know what? I was on Good Morning Britain, which is a TV show in the UK this morning, and I rarely go on there now because usually it's Piers Morgan, who is great at what he does, but I'm not going to go on any show where you just get shouted at. For me, that just isn't a discussion point. I love being Agony Aunt on This Morning. I love This Morning. It's my home. But a friend of mine was going on at the same time. said that we'd debate against each other. And I love the Good Morning Britain crew. They're amazing. They're a lovely group of humans. Agreed to go on it. And it was all about lockdown and also about the fact that this particular doctor who's been advising the government has decided to have a bit of an intimate relationship with somebody who's not going to be seeing during lockdown, in spite of advising us what we should be doing. And I just went on because, firstly, of course, that's not right. I mean, you don't go and tell people to not visit their loved ones and then off you pop to do it. But I do understand why people breach those kind of rules, because human contact's really powerful and self-regulation when it comes to sex is almost impossible. So I do get it. I don't get the fact that a guy who's telling us it's all really dangerous would then choose to go and do something because he thinks he's immune to it that could be construed as dangerous. That causes me quite a lot of curiosity and inquisitive questions. But what I would say is, I'm just ready to go. I'm healthy. I'm youngish. My kids are healthy and young. I'm okay with going back to work. I'm okay with getting this economy running. I'm okay with getting mental health services back face to face. You know, I will take Mother Nature as she comes.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that people have got issues with us saying things like that. You know, it's. Well, what about, you know, people who've died and people who've got, you know, ill people who are there? And I understand why they're sort of self-isolating in case they pass it on to someone who don't want.
332 people died under 45.
I know, that's what I mean. The figures are showing otherwise now, aren't they? They're showing that it's demographically sort of, it picks the certain demographics.
They need to look at why comorbidities and being obese, for example, are problematic. And obviously the BAME network, that needs to be explored because that community itself needs to have exploration. But I think a lot of it is also just telling us that we need to start thinking about our bodies more and being more accountable and responsible to our own bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to come across as preachy and stuff, you know, but as we've said before on these podcasts, I used to eat meat and stuff like that. And someone said on Twitter today, you know, what would you have done? What could have happened if to stop this epidemic or pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, from kicking off, from happening? And like, well, there's one, you know, and it's plainly in front of us. You know, it's if the live meat markets, apparently it came from the live meat markets. We do not know, do we? We can't get into this conspiracy theorist because we're not that type of podcast yet. But if no one ate meat that much, or those markets weren't alive, then surely that would have not, this pandemic wouldn't have happened, you know, if that's where it came from, you know. So there's one, you know, and that but then that leads on to looking after our bodies again, isn't it? It's sort of, what are we putting in it? It sort of links a little bit, you know, obviously it would have stopped it from coming, but then the overweight, the obesity, you know what I mean, sort of ill health things, you know, and the food.
And poor communities as well are being affected. It's always the poorest and the ones who are least healthy with access to things that, you know, privileged communities have access to. They don't have access to it. So it's like, you think about all the places we used to work, you know, they were really, really poor areas.
Well, the sort of poorer areas of the northwest have overtaken, the northwest itself has overtaken London now with deaths. So, and then you look at sort of areas where I am from, Middlesbrough in the northeast, and I think there's only one place in the northeast which hasn't got anyone who's got it. And it's called Skelton, which is in northeast England, in the East Cleveland, and it's an area where no one's got it. There's been no cases and no deaths. You know,
I don't know what's happening in that respect. I just feel like
it is in the sticks, like, so.
No, I mean, I think that if you look at what is meant to be going on, it suggests that ridiculous amounts of us have been infected and been asymptomatic, so that a lot more of us have had it, which makes the statistics very skewed. And I do worry that we are screwing over the economy horrifically. And I know people are more important than money, but money does underpin your security, and if you don't have money, then it causes you huge problematic issues. Apparently half the British population are claiming from the government at the moment. Now I know that we aren't. We don't get any help, and that's okay. It's fine, no problem. But I know how I'd feel if I had suddenly gone from being in a job to being on universal credit. I mean, that must be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it's
absolutely terrifying.
It's like getting a taste of sort of unemployment in a way, isn't it? Which it is. It's you know. Like we've said before, though. We've said, you know, you're one step away, 2 steps away from everything just falling to bits, and like
my life. I was literally sat there the other day and I started to write a post. I haven't published it yet, but the post started with, just under 4 years ago, I was sat opposite a table in a coffee shop drinking coffee with my best friend. I was pregnant and she was talking about becoming a mother herself in the future. Just fast forward now to just under 4 years ago, to now, since then, that best friend is dead. I miscarried. My father's taken his own life, and there's been a pandemic. Like,
you couldn't write that, could you? Well, you could write it, but it'd be a horrible film.
It just shows you what you're saying. everything that you build your security around, it's just a breath away from being taken away. That's why I constantly go on about pragmatism and being more able to say, listen, Mother Nature is a serial killer, bitches. Get used to it. And people get angry with you for having that conversation. The idea that because you're honest about the fact that, one, we die, and secondly, some of us die of things earlier than we should, the fact that people get angry with you about that shows the level of disassociation and the level of self-deception that people have around this reality. Everybody listening to this now, you're going to die. It was always going to be the way. It's the only way it's ever been. There's no way of escaping it. Some of you are going to get to live a long, lovely, glorious life and die in your bed. Some of you are going to die young and more painfully. Some of you are going to die somewhere in between. That's happening to all of us. None of us escape. And the fact that people get angry with you for having discussions about reality worries me deeply. I know that my pragmatism comes from losing people and having to finally accept that the only way I can be happy is to walk around going, I am going to lose people I love, and that's okay. That means that I've just got to learn to appreciate people so much more and be more open and honest and authentic about the relationships that I have with them, instead of doing that constant wanting to avoid that real reality that is everywhere. And it's true, you go online and you put something about that and people are so angry with you. Like, there seems to be this thing that if you dare to say, I am okay with death, I am okay with this infection, I'm okay even with getting it, people will be like, you are killing women, children, and people who don't deserve to die, right? It's like, at no point do I think anybody is going to enjoy loss, nor would I wish not to be able to prevent loss. Of course I would. But guys, it's happening.
Yeah.
And there's no way you're going to escape. So I tell you what, come to terms with it. The only time I think that loss is completely unachievable to really reconcile is when it's a child. And I mean that, like, I'm the first person, my pragmatism extends to any adult, anybody who is your age and above. But when it comes down to your children, and I mean any age, I think that's impossible to reconcile. I think you have to make peace with it in a different way, which is kind of a, well, I'm glad I don't have that many more years to live than I would. That kind of thing.
Yeah, then it sort of comes back to the sort of, then you start getting used to your own death after that.
Yeah. I mean, I now don't have any fear of death.
Yeah. No.
I mean, I've said that to you, like, I have no fear of death.
No,
I
think I used to, a little bit. But the more I've grown and explored in my own head and, you know, with the people around me and stuff, I think, and what's an experiences, I'm not at all, no.
We actually speak quite a lot to our kids, don't we, about the idea of us taking our own lives in the end with the help of Dignitas or hopefully assisted suicide.
You don't, I mean, it might be sort of legal in this country then, you know.
Oh, hope so.
But to go out with dignity, really, when you're to an age where, you know, I don't want to be crapping myself and ill and
I just want to have had enough. I want to go out when I know that I'm enjoying that.
People say they die of old age. You don't just die of old age. You don't just die of old age. There's always some underlying health issue, which
85% of people die in hospital.
Yeah,
we have taken dying out of the home. We've medicalised it. We've disassociated ourselves with it, and we've grown afraid of it. We should die in our beds at home, surrounded by people that love us. Yeah. Our bodies should stay there. And if my father hadn't killed himself, I would have kept his body at home during and after that period.
Yeah,
and I would have been able to wash him and create a lovely environment for us to have spent time with him. I would have been able to cradle ourselves through that grief process and beginnings.
Well, sing to him and everything, you know, and just, you know.
And instead, I had to let him go because that was how it was. And when my best friend died, I kept her, you know. Okay, her partner wanted her to go to the funeral home, you know, 24 hours afterwards. But I asked, could I have her for 24 hours? And I did her makeup and I washed her and I made her, you know, look beautiful. And it was very important for me to do that. I wanted us to get friends and people came round and we drank together and we laughed and we cried and, you know, we were very much present with her. And that to me is a time that I don't look back on with horror. The horror had been when she was dying, you know, the minute that she took that last breath and I was able to kind of know that she was completely free and she was at peace and I knew that she'd be back with her mum and dad. Then it was so important for me to make peace with her body and to just have those moments before I say goodbye to her. Yeah. And we just don't do it in this country anymore. We're just really bad. I think the Irish are better, but I think in the UK we're still really awful. Sorry, I mean in England and Scotland and Wales we're not that great.
Yeah, it's just funny. It's a funny subject to bring up for people, and the more I do think we need to talk more about it, especially with not young children, but you know. When they get to a certain age, you've got to start getting people used to this is what we are, we're human. And, you know, once you get used to it, you know, you don't have to worry about it. You know, you're not sat there thinking it's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to, you know, it's just, you just know that it is part of being human. It is a normal thing, you know, and to discuss it and not suddenly just go, death, what's that? I've never known about, we said that before, you know, it's, you know, some people are shocked that death is a real thing now, you know, and it's been brought to the forefront by this pandemic, you know, and people can't believe that it's real. And I think by discussing it from an early age.
And also letting people be around it. Like, I don't have any regrets about letting our children be around that stuff. You know, it's about them understanding that there is a beginning and an end and that that's acceptable. But I just think at the moment, it feels like we have this real disconnect. It's a disconnect. Like, the very thing that makes us human is our being born and dying. And like, it's, you know, a journey that for some of us is easier. Some of us is more challenging. Some of us is very difficult, but it's a journey that we're going on. And it gets slightly easier when you make peace with the fact that this is, you know, a breath in consciousness and the big beyond of everything. And what do you do and what do you make of that? That's up to you.
Yeah.
But I do now, within this pandemic, think things don't make sense to me anymore. Like, things don't make sense to me anymore.
I think there's a lot of people thinking that. There's people going like different ways, isn't there? There's people like, there's a darker narrative to this thing, what's going on, what is going on, you know, the money stuff, the people are in power.
Well, let's say the Out of Shadows that we watched. So there's a thing done by two stunt guys called Out of the Shadows. It's really interesting to watch, actually. I would watch it. I genuinely would.
Out of Shadows, isn't it?
Out of Shadows, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's basically by two stuntmen. Just look up two stuntmen, basically, doing a documentary, Out of Shadows. Yeah. And somebody wrote this really amazing thing because it's absolutely horrifying.
It is.
And it does make you really think, because these are guys who don't seem to have any benefit from doing this. There doesn't seem to be any payoff for them at all.
No, they've just lived, the career's been fantastic, and they've sort of, it feels like they've been learning as they go along and observing and not taking notes till a later date, but observing what has been happening and you know, maybe sometimes putting two and two together and getting 8, you know what I mean? But most of the time putting two and two together and getting the right number and realising that certain things are happening and it's real, you know? And
well, they're talking about like child sexual exploitation and, you know, the way that it underpins a lot of things that we see, like obviously Epstein and all the things that have been coming out there. You know, this isn't something that isn't real, but it is amazing that when things like that come out, it gets very little press. And people just seem so desensitized to it. I almost feel like people watch these documentaries that are full of real horror and yet nobody responds. It's almost like we've been programmed to watch really nasty things and to just not react.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, because I know that this stuff exists, and you will hear it constantly. I will hear constantly online. I will hear in books. I will hear by academics saying things like, well, satanic worship doesn't exist. Well, yes, it does.
But
it's ridiculous to not say that it does, because we have evidence of cults that have practiced it. Also, we have people in America in particular who follow it. And on top of that, I'm not suggesting that then reaches into some kind of sacrifice. I don't know. What I'm saying is the idea of denying that these sex rings exist is denying that Epstein ever lived, for example.
But the people who are following Satan itself, and it says that they have to do for their beliefs, sacrifices. So, you know, it goes hand in hand, you know, whether it's them people telling people to do this sort of thing or whatever, but it is happening, you know, and it makes you wonder as well, like you see like Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, you know,
horribly abused.
You know, like shouting it from the rooftops.
And people don't
years
care.
And years and years and years and years. You know, Corey Haim took his own life. He went into drugs and all sorts, you know, and Corey Feldman's, you know, he seems like a wonderful person and he's obviously a little bit messed up with it, obviously, you know.
You couldn't not be.
You know, you look at him, it's typical for somebody like himself.
Addiction problems, all of those things,
and he's in hiding and he's made these things and it just sort of links together with these other stories and you think, you know what?
But what the main media does and what happens a great deal, you know, in the press is they make people look mad.
Yes.
There's a lot of work goes into making people look mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you're somebody who doesn't fit into the typical average box that people are comfortable with, the only way to deflect that person isn't somebody who's got an interesting idea that maybe has seen a different perspective is to kind of suggest that they are not typical. And we always say that, you know, there are people out there who are atypical and therefore not neurotypical. And what we say is that that's because they don't seem to fit the average typicality. But that's just because the society is only made to fit typicality. It doesn't mean that the person who's not typical has a problem. It's just that the society it's been plugged into doesn't have the resources to meet the needs and accept them as the human beings that they are. Like, if you think about tribes used to use every single player.
Yeah.
So a tribe might take somebody, let's say, who was atypical on the spectrum, who's very high functioning Asperger's or autism now, but would have once been known as that person would have been the person who mapped all the routes to find where food was.
Yeah.
They would have known the right hunting places. They would have been able to tell you exactly what was happening in certain areas because that would have been their absolute gift, right?
And then the hunters, they're going,
Then there would have been people like me, the empaths. There'd have even been the psychopaths.
Yeah,
who would have had a role because they wouldn't have murdered their own. They'd have been happily out murdering the others.
It's like, you know, we've talked about it before in the podcast, being a psychopath and you put it to good use. You know, it's...
We've evolved to say you're not useful anymore.
Yeah, the media and governments and people in charge are really good at making a lot of people look pretty crazy if they want to, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. It's strange, really, because I like work in the media and I love it. And I think there is loads of good in the media. I think it's like where we learn about things and where we question things, and there's a lot of integrity there. But I do also think that there's a lot of fear because you want to keep your job.
Yeah.
So whenever I go and say something contentious, like this morning, I was saying something contentious. I was kind of accusing the guy who was in the government's medical advisory board of kind of going against his own rules because he's probably not trusting that he has to worry that much and he's got his figures wrong a lot. I always sit there and think, oh my God.
Well, no, it's you know, if you don't speak out about these things, I mean, how can the guy helped make the rules up? It was him who advised that rule to do that and then broke it. I mean, come on. Anybody with a brain can be like...
You'd be surprised, Peter.
Yeah, but people, I mean, even people...
There's some really intelligent people who just don't get that kind of thinking. It's also like, at the moment, there's this massive thing about anti-vaxxers going out. So anti-vaxxers get a really hard press, and basically they're put in the same category as flat earthers and anything that doesn't toe the party line. But whilst my children were vaccinated, I realise now, looking back, that I didn't really explore as I should have, because when I was young, I got measles and I got mumps. And my sister actually was given the vaccination for whooping cough, got really sick with whooping cough. So my mum wouldn't let me have it. So there are things that I did as a parent, just assuming that it was the right thing to do, that now I think both my boys have got really serious asthma. Both my boys have got really bad allergies. We've started to just detox our home because we think that there are some real problems with toxins in our home. So I do not believe that anti-vaxxers should be seen to be mad, even though I might go ahead and decide to have my immunisation for flu, for example. That doesn't mean that I judge anyone who believes otherwise.
I think anti-vaxxers should be looked at as just someone with their...
choice.
That's their choice.
Pro-choice.
Their freedom of speech, their freedom of choice. Yeah.
But there's new legislation being passed that suggests that people... And this is a study that I read the other day, and it's a UK study... And it basically suggests that women who choose not to vaccinate their babies are more likely to be mentally ill. Who has thought of that up?
That's draconian, that.
It is draconian.
That's like the olden days when they used to say that women always got a little bit mental because they had a womb.
Well, it's what we get called hysteria for.
Hysteria, yeah. That's just absolutely bonkers, that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's just, you know, how can somebody have a choice to, you know... I think I had the polio vaccination on a sugar cube, you know... But I had measles, I had mumps when I was a kid. I had a lot, you know, and I don't recall. I even managed to dodge the TB, you know.
But so many people have peanut allergies now and everything. It's like,
I haven't got TB.
What's changed? What's changed? No, sanitation's got better, so people choose not to vaccinate the kids because of that.
Yeah.
I just think it's really strange that when you start to medicalise a society and people go, well, I don't really want to be medicalised, you know. In Tibet and the Himalayas, people aren't running in going, we need to immunise you. It's like you're allowed to just live a very natural, organic life. That's your lifestyle. We would never, ever suggest doing anything else. But because we've medicalised the Western world, anybody who chooses to want to go on a more natural route is now seemingly considered mad.
Well, there's our 17-year-old boy, our oldest, he came out with something a couple of weeks ago, which was actually quite interesting. And he said about the vaccination. And there's people out there, you know, the Gateses and stuff like that, saying that everybody should be vaccinated in the world. Everybody should be vaccinated because, unless you can't travel, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? But let's just sitting on a fence here, right? Say you don't get vaccinated, right? Then surely you're not going to be any problem for the people who are vaccinated
No.
because they're vaccinated. So even if you did get it or carried it, the people who vaccinated themselves will be safe from it because they've got vaccination, and the people who didn't want the vaccination, then that's up to them. If they want to get it and get ill, that's their prerogative. It's their body, but they're still not going to hurt anybody who's been vaccinated. So why would you stop them from being? It's only the people who've taken the choice not to be vaccinated that would catch it. They're not going to pass it to anybody who's. So it's sort of a. It cancels it out, really. You know, so why can't you fly if there's two people on a flight that haven't had a vaccination, everybody else is vaccinated, those two people on the flight could catch it, but they're not going to spread it to anyone else except for you and the other person who have taken that choice not to take the vaccination. That's up to them. No one else is going to get it because they're vaccinated.
I know, I get really worried when people start using words like it'll only be equitable if everybody has it. And it's like, well, religious denominations aren't going to have it. Particular people who believe in more natural ways of living aren't going to have it.
Most vaccines have some sort of animal derivative in it. So
yeah, so like the flu up the nose for our boys isn't possible because it's got animal derivatives in it. It's all of those things that you kind of sit back and go, you know, guys, like how often do you question what's in the things you take? And I know people who've never taken any medical drugs who are really healthy. Like I've met people I've worked with in TV who've never even had pain relief. One woman broke her leg really badly in a skiing accident. They got to the hospital and they tried to inject her and she went crazy with them because she said nothing has ever been in my body. And she was, but for her,
that's hardcore.
Allowing somebody to have control over her body denied her the right and responsibility and accountability to her own body herself. And I think, wow, power to you. My bigger thing is not whether you choose to vaccinate or otherwise, it's do you question? That's the one that I want to get across. Like, how often, when you are prescribed something, do you go home and read the label?
Well,
but how often?
This is where it comes to this disinfectant thing that Donald Trump. You see, I'm not a massive Donald Trump fan at all, really. I don't really.
We don't know enough about Donald Trump, do we?
I don't know about politics, so I can't really.
No.
You know, he comes across as a bit of an idiot sometimes. Just maybe that's just the personal.
May I remind you that we have Boris Johnson leading our country right now?
Exactly, yeah. And if anybody see that photo of his kid, I mean, it's a baby, a little baby.
Had a wig.
Just looked like he had a wig on. I'm not. But yeah. Anyway, I digress. Yeah,
it was quite cute.
It was, yeah. It just looked like Donald Trump.
It was like a little baby with a little wig.
Donald Trump head. Yeah, not Donald Trump, but Boris Johnson head.
Well, I don't know. It did look quite full and thick, the hair.
Who is the father? He didn't have any question. Not really.
Well, you're joking me with his background and history. That's a perfectly okay question to pose.
Yeah, it is. But the disinfectant thing, it's like, you know, he wasn't saying about injecting bleach, which I understand that some people couldn't take things literally. I understand that, you know, but you look at the stuff like you're saying there, going back to the point is, the stuff that you take home that you're putting into your body, half the time it's got like petrol in or some form of, you know, it's like, you know, Vaseline you're putting on your lips or around your genitals or whatever. It's petrol.
I know.
Like, you're putting it in your body. People that's safe to, like, you know, don't put it inside your, but it does get put inside your body because you put it on your lips, you swallow it. Use other things.
Don't use a naked flame nearby.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's like all these years we've been going about our business, trusting things. And I think that it's been one of the biggest wake-up calls for me, this pandemic, because I don't trust a lot. I don't. And it's not that I don't think there's a virus going around. I know there is. I appreciate that. But I also, you know, in the year 2000, nearly died of a virus that basically caused double pneumonia, put me in hospital for 3 weeks. And it was horrific.
It's a caveat that we're not saying, obviously we know there's a virus going around, we're not trying to dumb down the people who died from this and have been ill with it, you know, we're just trying to point out a few little things and question stuff. So,
well, what we're trying to do as well, I think, is trying to ask everybody that question, like, how often do you think about what you're told? Like, how often do we question the narrative? My thing that I always say is that if everybody's going in one direction, I'm going to walk the path to the side because I reckon that I'll probably see a better picture of what's real. And that might not always be popular, but I think that's probably a safer place to be. If people just blindly follow, and I understand why people blindly follow, it's because they trust, and they trust because they don't see that there was a reason not to. But I've learned through history that trust is something that people have to earn. And I can't trust this government because they've just had us in austerity for years. And I can't trust this government because they've lied on lots of levels and been evidenced to have lied on lots of levels, lots of the time. So why am I going to trust them because of what they're saying now?
I'm probably throwing out a guess here though, but I'm probably guessing that 90% of the Tory government, I'm not anti-Tory, I'm not anti-Labour. I would go and I would vote whoever was the best. I am red at the moment, but I'd go for it. If the Tories were like the best, I'd vote for them. But I'm saying as coming from working class background and being on the front line of things over many years. No, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but I have worked within the mental health arena for a long time, and with young people mainly. And none of these people know what it's like to have been on the front line of the working force of the UK.
As well.
And then another point, and I'm not being off, the NHS are brilliant, you know what I'm saying? But, the government removed the funding. And then it's just, what? And now they're like masking it all with the clapping for them and stuff, which is, yes, I understand that. But like Boris Johnson on his step, he says, hang on a minute, mate, you voted to like remove the funding from the NHS.
I know.
It's like, let's build a massive hospital that isn't needed as well, just to try and mask that we're actually doing something. There's a... I wouldn't.
That's what I mean. There's a lot of questions that you've got to ask.
Is it darker than we think? The people will be telling me to shut up now, going, "No, get your tinfoil hat on," But like you're saying,
but if
ask the question. Don't ask what.
Exactly.
Someone comes to me with proof and say, "There we go. This is why. This is what." Not somebody who who's. This is why I saw some of the Labour MPs and stuff like that are like doing their own. Inquest into certain things because and there was a question this morning which I totally understand his reaction to it. It's like, and the question was on Good Morning Britain, do you not trust the government then? Like, why they're coming out with these figures? And it's like, well, it's not that we don't trust, but we're the opposition, so we need to find out ourselves. We can't just take he needs the shadow secretary he was, and it's like I can't take the answers of a government that we're opposed to. I've got to find out myself, and it's like having a second opinion with a doctor. People who diagnose you with certain things, I want to have a second opinion, and they come up with something different. It's like, then you.
Yeah, I also think that at the moment, for me, one of the scariest things that they're doing is, cutting down David Icke's channel. Like, I am no David Icke fan. You do not catch me watching videos of David Icke. I was brought up at a time where he reminds me of a shell suit and claiming to be Jesus. I'm not sure whether that...
Before that, he was a sports commentator.
He was a great sports commentator. I'm not even sure what that was all about, but that was kind of the narrative you were told in the press. So I've never been interested in kind of whatever he thinks, but I know that he has a huge following and that he questions things. And recently he was talking about 5G. Now, again, what I am not a fool over is the idea that millimetre radiation and radiation per se is good for us. It isn't good for us. Listen, nobody has to be a scientist to know that any type of radiation is great. And, cancers have been increasing exponentially in different ways since we started using more and more radiation. But you know what? I like my mobile phone and I like the internet, right? So I appreciate that 1 in 2 of us will get cancer. I'm sure that a lot of that is to do with things that if we could just live a different, better way, we would be healthier and happier. But this is the modern society. I'm in it. Part of my job is the media. Therefore, I accept that there is a cost to what I like, right? But I'm not going to pretend there isn't something to do with the way that we live our lives in modern technology. It's got to have an impact. It's got to have an impact.
I mean, I've seen a lot. I've got
Marie Curie walked around with some in her pocket, didn't she?
With what?
Wasn't it Marie Curie?
I don't know.
Who was it who walked around with some radium in her pocket and then she got cancer and she's known for like a research? Was it Marie Curie?
I don't. Well, like the Marie Curie's isn't she the cancer hospital person?
Just give me a second. I'm just going to have a look.
I'm sure there's like hospitals named after
Chat amongst yourself.
Yeah, chat amongst myself. So, the Marie Curie walked on with some radium in her. What was that? She had radium in her pocket.
Let's have a look at film for one, please. Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Where's that?
What?
Temple of Doom.
What's this?
Titles.
That's nothing to do with the Marie Curie or the radium. That was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Which film is Harrison Ford? What's the prequel or the sequel to?
She was the first woman. Sorry, I'll come back. Marie Curie was the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and she had 2 scientific fields. She was part of the Curie family legacy. She was also the first woman to become a professor of Paris. She basically died from exposure to radiation. Yeah, she
Right.
carried around a piece of radium or something in her pocket.
No way. Why was that? Just to prove it?
No,
Wow,
I think
it's
that
a really hardcore way of like proving something, isn't it?
I think that she wanted
Nuke myself.
to explore things. She had a
Right.
plastic anemia for exposure to radiation in the course of her scientific research.
Right.
And also when she was working in World War. So radiation causes cancer.
Yeah, of course.
There's no doubt about it. So the idea that Ike is saying things about 5G is because people have then gone out and ripped down nets. But really masks like that, you
But
don't...
you think we said go to the dentist or the hospital to get an X-ray, and they hide behind
Yeah.
lead walls.
Exactly.
And you're sat there, and
Yeah.
you're like, surely I should be hiding behind a lead wall.
Well,
No,
they
you're
put
all
like
right.
over your gonads, they put like
Yeah.
a Kingsling gonad protector.
Yeah. It's just because we're doing it every single day, all day. Well, that can't be good for you then.
Yeah.
It can't be good for you.
So it can't be. So, but then again, I appreciate that. But what's happened to him is they've taken down his channel because he said that he has issues around 5G. Now that scares me because at the moment we're locked down in houses. We're told what we've got to do. We're told what we're not allowed to do. We're fined if we do something that goes against what we think we should be doing. We're denied seeing our friends. And on top of that, they've changed laws that mean that I can now be detained indefinitely under the Mental Health Act if I disagree with
Yeah,
whatever I'm being
which-
told.
yeah.
And on top of that, they're stopping people having the freedom of speech. A democracy begins, middles, and ends with my capacity to express what I think and feel.
Yeah.
The minute you remove that from me, we're not living in a democracy, it's a dictatorship.
There's probably a few people out there have realised as well that when they're posting things on Facebook as of late, they're not being seen.
Yeah.
You know, and it might be that the words it's picking up on, or you know, and it says that it goes against the community guidelines, and they've really become like the community guidelines are like, you cannot say anything we do not want you to say. You know, whether it be anything to do with 5G or whether anything to do with the government or whether it's anything, you know, I
It's
put something up
scary.
about our squirrel the other day and one person saw it.
Wow.
It's like they've stopped because maybe I've shared something I don't know or put something up. They've stopped anyone from going on anyone's feed. It picks and chooses. It's that's not a social media, I'm afraid.
No, that's the police media.
Yeah.
That's control media. It should be called control media.
I wouldn't even say the police. It's a policed media, not
The
police.
policed
Yeah.
media, control media. Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, the lot of them.
Mm.
The only people who've won in this bloody pandemic are all those rich people who already had everything they needed and they've just got richer and bigger and bolder and more controlling. And people like us, we're sat in our rooms abiding by laws that we don't really understand, being kept in from some virus that they're now saying that we need to either get or be immunised against. It's bizarre.
I think there's people like, you know, obviously Amazon and stuff like that have all reaped the benefits. But if you remember, right at the beginning of this epidemic, a pandemic, whatever you want to bloody well call it, that Zoom, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is done really well, and everybody's about Zoom this, Zoom that, which I understand. I wonder who owns Zoom. I wonder because they tried to rubbish it. Remember at the beginning of this, they were like,
they?
"Don't use Zoom because the security's like,
Yes.
it's really bad. You can't use it," and it's like. I just thought that they were
Controlling.
trying to stop people from using Zoom for some reason, weren't they? Obviously. So the media, or whoever owns the media, or whatever, put out that no, it's a security breach, or somebody hacked it because of the security, which is probably true, which it is true. But
Yeah.
you know, is that something to do with that
It's
somebody
all
else
like
wanted
that.
theirs to be used?
Control.
But you know,
crazy.
they seem to have done pretty well out of it. Zoom, you know, so
Wish we'd bought shares in
Zoom,
PPE, sanitizer.
yeah.
Maybe an app to trace everybody so that everybody knows where everybody is who's ever been
Yeah.
infected, even though they could just put in that they had symptoms and make it up and
But-
you wouldn't know anything.
Instead, we have a conscience and we have
Happy
yeah, we have a what we like to think is a little bit of kindness
in
and we
this
wanna
crazy
give-
world.
Yes, and we're about to unleash something wonderful.
Hey, somebody might be listening to this 5 years down the line. We might not even own it anymore. It might have done really, really
And
well.
there's those two people that launched that Happy app that made
Yeah.
everybody so happy.
And now lives on an island called Peatsville,
Yeah.
where only happy, nice people are allowed.
Yeah.
And we question everything.
And all those people that we've talked to on social media about running a farm and living on a warm island, they'll all be with us.
They'll love it with us and it'll be amazing. And it
Yeah.
won't be a cult.
And it won't be a cult.
It
no.
won't be a cult.
No
It'll
one
be a
will in
nice place to
charge.
go. It'll be a nice community.
Democratic.
And on that bombshell, another rambling session.
I think we've made at least a little bit of sense of it.
We rarely make sense of it. We just talk and then in the end feeling more confused than we began.
I don't know. I think there's been some sense made on this one.
Well, maybe you could comment and let us know.
Yeah.
We're going to try and get back into this on a weekly basis, so hopefully you'll see more. We've not even begun to touch on the surface of what happened during the last few years of being absent. We will try to catch you up, but it has been a rather traumatic period of time. Whilst we've touched a little bit about it on one other, we'll go into it in more detail, but lots of things to talk about.
Oh yes, we will. We'll get back into it.
Stay safe, stay warm, stay questioning, stay curious. More than anything, stay curious. Take care. Bye.